Hi, I'm Rob Cosman. Welcome to my shop. I'm going to share with you the top 10 videos we had in 2023, meaning the ones that were viewed the most, top 10. I was surprised, but this may actually give you a reason to go back and check some of them out. I'm going to give you a little synopsis of each one. We'll work from 10 down to number 1. Stay with me, see what it is. So number 10 was sharpening chisels by hand. I think the title was Sharpening Chisels by Hand Like a Pro. Had 57,000 views. I harp on sharp, but you know what? There is no substitute for a sharp tool when it comes to hand tool woodworking. In particular, chisels. This is the one tool that anybody that does any kind of woodworking has a chisel. And the difference between having a sharp chisel and one that isn't sharp is so drastic. I don't know how you can state it in any stronger terms, that you have to learn how to sharpen. Freehand sharpening means I can go over there and in 15-20 seconds at the most I can come back and I have a tool that is ready to perform at maximum capacity and with maximum control. Sharper it is, the less effort you have to apply to make the tool work. The less effort you apply, the more control that you're granted, better will be the result. So if you haven't seen that one, it's worth going back and viewing. Keeping your chisel sharp is probably task number 1 in the run of a day. So number 9, best workbench ever. Can't remember the exact title. That one actually, by the way, I forgot to mention the first one was shot in June of 2020. And this one, no, I'm sorry, October of 2020. This was shot in June of 2020. And it still managed to get 58,000 views. Now, I want to show you a little bit about this because I think it is the best workbench ever if you consider a couple of features. Workbench needs to be flat. First and foremost, it has to be flat. This becomes the reference for everything that you do, particularly in hand tool woodworking. It needs to be solid, meaning it can't be bouncing around when you're pounding on or you're chopping dovetails with the chisel and a mallet. And number 3, you want it to be nice and heavy. So we make this out of water-resistant MDF. The top is 3 inches thick. And we have the plans. We've shown this on numerous YouTube videos, actually. We use a Schoberg vise, which I think is the best vise of that type. It takes about 15 minutes to install. It doesn't rack, meaning it doesn't wiggle side to side. So when you clamp something, it stays put. It's fantastic that way. It's drilled for 1-inch bench dogs. We use aluminum bench dogs, so if you happen to bump into them with your plane, you're not going to destroy your plane. Has a tool tray, pardon me, not a tool tray, but a sharpening tray. This is the tool tray that we've attached. Has a sharpening station over here, and these benches get used heavily in our classes. We go through and teach 84 individuals each year serious hand tool woodworking skills, and this is the bench that they learn on. It works extremely well and relatively inexpensive and easy to build. We designed it with a novice in mind, very few tools, materials that you can pick up at a big box store, and literally in a weekend you can put together a bench that might serve you the rest of your woodworking career. That was number 9. This one was number 8. It was a wood wax finish, my new favorite finish. That's it right there, Renaissance wax. Now, I built lots of these little wood hinge boxes, and they're a pain to finish. If you oil them, you have to have multiple coats of oil. If you spray them, you always work in between each coat. This is a 1 application. It tells you additional applications don't do anything to improve it. This is on a Pacific U with ebony. It's just an absolutely gorgeous feel after it's done, and you literally apply it, wipe it on, and then immediately wipe it off. And this one that is made out of English walnut and holly ended up sitting in a part of the shop where it leaked one time when it rained, and this was full of water when it was done. Well, it took probably 2 months to completely dry out, but I had to touch it up a little bit, but it offered that much protection that I salvaged the box. And this is one out of black walnut with birch. Great finish, simple, easy. It's not cheap, but I think it's worth every penny. So if you're looking for a fantastic work, by the way, that had a little over 58,000 views as well, if I didn't already mention it, and that one was shot, as I mentioned, in April of 2023, so that one's getting some traction as well. Number 7, we're actually back to chisel sharpening. This one was entitled Chisel Sharpening, the 17-degree chisel. Now this is another production. We actually shot this one in May of 2023, and this one has had 61,000 views. So I came up with this idea several years ago. The one on my left is a 25 degree, the one on my right is a 17 degree. So if you look at the two of them, I don't know how you can see that side by side, but how much more acute this 17 degree is. And the reason I have it, or made it, and the reason why you might want to consider it, if you deal with a lot of really soft woods, I'm going to name a few: pine, aspen, alder, any of the cedars, then they have a tendency to crush when you're chopping. Instead of cutting clean, the fibers break and big chunks come out, particularly in between your pins or your tails. What I found was that if you cut your primary bevel back to 17 degrees, it reduces the pressure that's being applied on the wood. You kind of have to think this through and imagine how it happens when you're pushing the chisel through, that the higher that bevel angle, the more pressure is actually being applied on the wood fiber as the chisel is sliding through some of it. The stuff up here in the front is absorbing the pressure of the bevel, pushing down. The fibers underneath crush instead of break cutting, and big chunks come out. It's just a mess. Anyway, let me just demonstrate it. What I found, if I cut my primary bevel down to 17 degrees, it would allow me to go in and chop that wood and keep it nice and clean. Now there's a little bit of fracturing, but it's minimal. You can't use this on anything hard. Even walnut, cherry, maple, that's all too tough. There's not enough metal out there. But if you deal with softwoods, real easy to compress softwoods, you want to do a couple of your chisels. I recommend 1/4 Usually you'll get by on it, but I warn you, don't use it on hardwoods. The edge will fold. On softwoods, it'll slice through that stuff magically. Anyway, go in and check that video out. It's worth it. You can make these yourself. It's not that difficult. So number 6, sharpening a plane blade 2020. Obviously we shot that one in May of 2020. And that one has had 105,000 views. That's an updated version of our 32 seconds to sharp. And like I say all the time, sharpening is everything. Doesn't matter how good your tools are. If they're not sharp, they're not going to work well. This is a piece of hard maple, and it just comes off like silk. So easy. It's all because the plane blade is sharp, and it leaves a finish that is just, you cannot match this with any degree of sandpaper. Learning to freehand sharpen is an easy skill. I teach it to 84 people every year at least in a class. It takes one day, well, not quite one day, in order to actually get to the point where you can do it effectively every time. It requires good tools, good sharpening medium, I mean, and a little bit of training. You can actually pick it up off of a video. Thousands have, but once you do it, you'll never go back to sanding. It's so addictive. Being able to pull that off a piece of hardwood is just the most fun you'll have in the shop. Check that one out if you haven't already seen it. So number 5, and the reason why I'm still playing in this piece of wood, number 5 was sharpening planes and chisels in the real world, which is a little bit of a carryover from the one I just explained. However, this one is more geared towards what do I need to do to that blade in order to get it to work properly. And you continue to take that edge higher and higher, but is the benefit there? I like a system, and I preach this. You need a system that allows you to go from whatever you're building to stop briefly, go over, sharpen, and come right back to work. And I always say you need to sharpen to the point where you can no longer detect that there is room for improvement. So if I can do in 32 seconds a job on my edge that will produce a surface that you cannot improve, then why would you spend 33 seconds? So that video we shot, I think, in September of 2023, and it's had 124,000 views in the last part of that year, so it was a good one. Go back and check that one out too if you want to drill home a little more how important it is to have a system that works for you. But I encourage you, learn to do it by hand. It's not difficult. So number 4 was how to cut dovetails by hand, a new approach 2020. What would a year be without a Rob Cosman dovetail video? This one explains in detail the offset method using the Sean Shim, a little device whose idea came from a wounded vet named Sean McDermott. We turned it into a product. A dovetail marking knife with a sawtooth blade that matches the blade in the saw. And the process of doing it makes it so that anybody can cut dovetails beyond belief in terms of what you think you could do and as to what you can do a day later. Now that one we shot in, that was in July of 2020, had 148,000 views in 2023. And I want to show you an example. So as I said, I teach classes that amounts to, what do we do, 84 students every year. Half of those are combat wounded veterans. And the really good ones go up here on the wall, the ones that they let me have. So I want to highlight this one. This is Charlie. Charlie was in our class just recently. Charlie was blown up multiple times, had lots of traumatic brain injuries. Didn't think he was going to get it. He worked on it for several days, but on Friday he came to me with that. And I thought, wow, Charlie, if you let me have that, I'll put that on my wall. That's an example of what somebody can do if they use this method. You need a really good saw. I have no shame in telling you that this is the best saw you're going to find for cutting dovetails. That dovetail marking knife and the Sean Shim, the way they work together, will produce gap-free dovetails the first time you do it. Don't believe me? Try the video. Anyway, check that one out for sure. So, of all the videos, I was surprised that this one made it in the top 3. And this one was top 10 wood species to use for fine woodworking. We shot this one in March of 2023. It's had 190,000 views. And you might not believe it, but of all the woods that we work with, that I work with, my favorite is actually northern white pine. And you may not understand the reason why, but of all the woods, this one ages the best. And speaking of woods, I have to bring up this one. This is Vera wood. And this is a tribute to our good friend that we lost a year ago yesterday, Super Dave Benson. And that was Dave's favorite wood, Vera wood. Beautiful emerald green. I actually built his urn and we lined the inside with Vera wood. Had Purple Heart in the corners because of his service and his Purple Heart that he earned or was awarded. Anyway, big salute out to Super Dave and the 10 best woods. You'll love that one as well. Number 2. Top 10 tools not to buy. Based on my experience, I'm passing this on. I wish somebody had been around and said, Rob, don't get that for this reason. Tools I hate. That's a strong word. This is one of them. By the dust, you can tell it doesn't get used. So this is a low angle jack. And there's going to be people that freak out over this. Well, that's too bad. I hate this plane. Why? Awkward to adjust. No lateral adjustment on it. It sucks on the shooting board because you just don't have the mass, nor do you have the surface area on the side to keep it nice and stable. There is no way can this compete with a 5.5. So if you're interested in finding out, especially if you're new, sometimes you look at these tools, you see the ads, and you think, oh, this is going to be great. It's like this, Japanese saw in Western hardwoods. No. No, that little thin blade will wander and follow the path of least resistance. Hey, look it, we knew what we were doing however many hundreds of years ago. Western saws for Western hardwoods, Eastern saws for Eastern woods. So this one, at least you might get a kick out of it. Go back and check that out. We shot that one in, that was in October of 2023, and it's had 250,000 views, almost 250,000 views. So in just a couple of months, it garnered a lot of attention. That was number 2. So here we are at number 1. Now you got to remember, this is all my opinion. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. But I've got 50 years of woodworking behind me. And the title of this one was 10 species of wood not to use in fine furniture making. Shot this one in July of 23, and it's had 387,000 views in the 6 months since it was released. And you may argue or you may differ with this, but again, just an opinion. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. This one is red oak. And I always say when they use it in fast food restaurants, it's long past when you should stop using it for building furniture yourself. It's coarse, it's loud, smells, don't like it at all. Here's another example, Purple Heart. Now I just talked about using Purple Heart in Super Dave's urn as an accent wood. But to try to build something out of this, it's difficult to plane, it's coarse, It looks nice and purple, but if given enough light exposure, it'll actually go to this ugly brown. Not my favorite wood at all, and if you try to build something out of it, you're going to regret it. It is extremely difficult to work with for no great benefit. If you're building something off the color of the wood, you got to realize in a year, 2 years, 10 years, it's going to be a completely different color. There has to be more to it than that. Back to my favorite wood, pine. It just keeps getting this beautiful honey patina as it ages. And I can't think of another wood that gets any better. You can say cherry, but if given enough light exposure, cherry will go from that deep crimson back to bleached out, looks like a piece of birch or maple. So that's it, my top 10. Hope you enjoyed this. We love making these videos, sharing with you the knowledge that we have. And if it helps you, that's great. Had lots of comments and feedback from people that thank me, and I'm just here to say I enjoy doing it. I'm glad you enjoy it, and enjoy your woodworking. Keep up the good work. If you enjoy my method of work and like my style of teaching, click on any one of these videos to help take your woodworking to the next level. I've always said better tools make the job so much easier. If you click on the plane and chisel icon below, it'll take you to our site and introduce you to all the tools that we actually manufacture right here in our shop. It'll also give you information on our in-person and online workshops.